Okay, it's starting right now. I'll let you know when it's ready.
All right, thank you.
Okay, it's good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. At this time, we'll call to order the Tuesday, May 5th, 2020 workshop meeting of the Board of Education. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smythe?
Yes, this is the Wall Township Board of Education meeting for which adequate notice under the Open Public Meeting Act was provided by notice to the Co-Star, written notice to the Asbury Park Press and Township Clerk's Office, and to all Wall Township Public Schools, and a posting in the School District's Board Administration Office on January 16th, 2020. I'll take a roll call. Mr. Gartz?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Krupa?
Here.
Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Ms. Stites?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak?
Here.
And Mr. Adnesia?
Here. All right, at this time, could I have a motion to go into executive session for items A, G, and H?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Chris, can I have a second? Second by Ken, all in favor?
Aye.
Everybody in favor, okay. We will be back at approximately 7:30 PM.
Make sure you leave the meeting, please.
What are we doing then?
Executive session, Michael.
Is there a different link?
Yes, I will forward it to you.
It was a Google invite.
It's a separate one?
Yes.
Google Meet.
I know why you.
Is it Brian or Joe tonight? Brian?
Yes?
Hey, could you set me up as a host?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Thank you. And it's still gonna be a few before we start streaming, so I'll let you know.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
Do you think I have a couple minutes?
Oh, yeah,
I'll be right back, okay?
no problem. Just shut your camera off. Turn it back on when you come back.
Got it.
Hey, Ralph,
Yes.
I left the stream on YouTube. It's live from before.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's been recording the whole time?
Yeah, it just said executive session when you guys were gone.
Oh, okay. So there's gonna be a 45-minute gap in the video then, correct?
Yeah, because I mean, otherwise everybody would have to log off, and I would have to create another meeting ID, and then you'd have to,
Oh.
so,
Okay. No problem. It's
Okay.
easy enough to fast forward. Thank you.
okay.
Hey, Brian, I'm sorry, I had to restart my computer. Could you put me back as a co-host?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Murphy, no. We're just waiting for Ken.
Ralph, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Chris.
Okay, my apologies to everyone. We were going over a couple different things there. So I'm sorry for being late and I'm sorry for making people wait.
No problem. And we're just waiting for Ken to jump in.
Okay.
Sorry, Brian, could you do the co-host thing again? I had to jump out. My speaker stopped working. Thank you. And Ken should be in any second.
Ralph, maybe we can get going and Ken can join us. It's after 8. We should get
Yeah.
kind of moving.
All right. Okay. We're already recording, so at this time we will reconvene the Tuesday, May 5th, 2020 workshop meeting of the Board of Education. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Guards,
Here.
Mr. Hall,
Here,
Mr. Krupa,
I am here.
Ms. Mangan,
Here.
Mr. Nasser,
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo? Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here, sorry, spacebar wasn't working.
Ms. Stites?
Here.
Mr. Mondrak?
He should be in momentarily.
And Mr. Agnesian?
I am here. Thank you. All right. This time we will move on to policy. Dr. Gleason or Dr. Cram, who's taking that one tonight? Dr. Cram, your speaker's not on.
I'm going to take it this evening, Mr. President.
Can you hear me, Dr. Cram?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. It's saying my speaker's not working.
Yeah.
But, okay.
All right, well, with regard to the committee reports, we brought a significant number of first readings to the board this evening. These are changes to mandated policies. They've been distributed to the board for your review, and we have shared them with the administrative council in the event that they have some input. They include policies covering domestic abuse, health and physical education, administration of medication, supervision of construction, the school day, and reporting on potentially missing or abused children. I have a quick thumbnail for you on each of those. It seems of reading the policy and making comparisons between the revisions. That policy 1581 and the regulations 1581 are updates to the existing domestic violence policy. They revised the policy so that it is in line with the Uniform Domestic Violence Codes. And basically, it increases encouragement to staff for the reporting of domestic violence. It's a little bit more explicit as to offering the protections that the school district would offer to victims. And there are some extensive procedures outlined for human resources officers to follow in pursuing those complaints. The policy changes are carried through in the regulations are 1581. Policy 2422 are updates to the existing health and physical education policy. In the curricula area, it adds to the health and physical education program a unit on the history of disabled and LGBT persons and a unit on financial literacy. And I discussed those briefly with Mr. Redoux today, and he's well aware of them and is working on implementing that. Policy 5330 and the corresponding regulations updates to the existing administration of medication policy. This one's a little more complicated because it adds hydrocortisone sodium succinate to the prescriptions that can be administered by the school district. And there's regulations as to how parents would go about requesting that and to whom those requests would be made. And it also adds adrenal insufficiency to the conditions for which students can get self-medication. There are a number of other changes to the policy and regulations that reflecting those two additions. Policy 7243 is an update to the existing supervision of construction policy. It stipulates a little bit more clearly what the reporting procedures are on project progress, who does that reporting and to whom, and is a little more rigorous in the criminal background checks on contractors. Policy 8220 updates the existing school day policy and says that it is required that the board approve the school day annually in addition to the calendar. It further defines what a shortened day is for eligibility to be counted among the 180 days of instruction. And it requires notification of the board president of any unscheduled delayed openings or closures. And finally, policy 8462 updates the existing reporting potentially missing or abused children policy. And essentially it adds a requirement for the communication of information that comes from the Department of Children and Families Central Registry. So those are the ones that we are lodging this evening for a first reading. There are no second readings this evening, and previously we had talked about policies regarding electronic communications. They will remain under consideration pending updates from either the board's policy consultant or changes that we decide need to be made based on our experience with the online learning environment. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cram. Christine, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. President. I just wanted to mention in reviewing policy and regulation 5330, both policies mention physicians and advanced practice nurses. They do not mention anything about physician assistants. So I don't know if we need to change the language to say something to the effect of advanced practice provider. I don't know how specific we get, but they did change the language there for and basically an advanced practice nurse is a nurse practitioner. Physician assistants are also licensed to prescribe medications in the state of New Jersey. So, I don't know if you want to maybe say something about an APP, which does include advanced, physician assistants. But I can take a look into that if you want.
So, go ahead, Dr. Kramer, I'm
I
sorry.
would appreciate it if you would do that, because in that
That's
language,
all.
it also speaks to other individuals in the system being designated to perform some of those services with the appropriate training. So, yeah, if you want to list other positions in there, that would be great. If you could let me know what language you think would address your concern, we'll take care of that.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions on the first reading of the policies? No? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to curriculum and instruction. Dr. Gleason.
Good evening, everyone. We have 2 items on tonight's agenda. The first being proposed summer programs. Just to give you a little bit of background, prior to COVID and the current pandemic we're in, the district had funded one summer program at the elementary level. We talked about this last month. That is Summer SOAR. It was a program, a literacy program for students in grades 2 through 5. It was a first come, first serve. It was not a teacher recommendation. It was more of a literacy enrichment program. And the district budgeted approximately $25,000 a year. The program would fill every year. And the purpose of the program was to enrich and strengthen critical literacy skills that would help those students moving up to the next grade level. That money was budgeted in the current budget prior to the situation we're in now, in which we are not only expected but required to start planning for summer programs. There's a broadcast that came out today that actually asks the districts to articulate in that emergency plan that we created back in March to the county and the state. We are now required to update that plan with specifically what we are going to do with regard to summer remediation in the areas that we've identified students may need additional help. So let me just give you one other piece. The other summer program that we had run prior to COVID was the Summer Night Academy. That was not district funded. That was an enterprise account that was parent paid. We ran programs for students in grades 2 through 12 that were enrichment programs. So they were based upon a survey of students' interests at the elementary level. Those programs ran along a variety of topics such as cooking, coding, and trying to think of a few other more fun, again, aligned with student interests. Parents paid for those programs, and we would only run the courses if there was enough enrollment to fund the teacher's salary to run those programs. With the current expectations regarding remediating some of the loss that we know is expected as a result of school closure, I think that it's important that we focus our efforts on summer remediation programs. And with all of the unknowns that we have, starting to formulate some ideas regarding both virtual summer remediation programs as well as live remediation programs. I had included as a placeholder in the budget funding for a summer remediation program for students in grades 1 through 5. Those are rising grades 1 through 5 at the elementary level, as well as funds appropriated for the middle school and the high school for students that are identified through teacher recommendation. I will say that I think it's going to be more challenging to enroll students in a voluntary program at the secondary level, particularly the high school, for a variety of reasons. The students at the high school level have jobs and a variety of other activities that they're involved in the summer. And if this is a voluntary program to help support them, I think that we will have less enrollment. I think our biggest financial impact and academic impact is going to be at the elementary level and potentially from there at the intermediate school. So we just wanted to give you sort of a heads up on some of the preliminary frameworks for what that may look like. And again, until we have more definitive guidance from the governor around what will be allowed in the summer, we really can only make very preliminary plans for what a face-to-face or live program would look like. Of course, it's going to be a bit easier to plan for a virtual program. As a very preliminary projection, we're projecting approximately 30% of students at each grade level in rising grades 1 through 5 as needing some potential remediation. So who are the students that need remediation? Teacher recommendations will be based upon a couple of factors. One will be the discrepancy with where the student was performing prior to school closure. So in marking periods 1, 2, and 3, how a student was doing at that time relatively well. And as a result of school closure, that there is evidence of a decline in performance. So that would be one factor that a teacher would make a recommendation. The second part of that recommendation would be factored into how much of the work in the virtual environment the student was able to accomplish. And if the student was not participating without any known reason in a considerable amount of work, and the teacher did not have evidence of mastery of the standards at that grade level, that would be another factor that the teacher would take into consideration for identifying that student for summer remediation. So we're continuing to work this week with the administrators on determining how we'll create that matrix. But as I say, it'll be based upon really teacher recommendation and those factors. And then we'd like to have that in place before the end of May so that teachers can begin providing those recommendations and we can see how aligned the actual numbers are versus what the projections were. And as I said, we were projecting approximately 30% at every grade level, which comes out to approximately 77 students. That would allow us to begin starting to formulate how many teachers we may need. And again, this will be based upon whether we can bring students into buildings. We'll have to take several things into considerations. If we are allowed to bring students into buildings at that time, we're hoping to push this program to August, so that'll give us a better shot at bringing kids onto campus and run a 4-week program, approximately 3 days a week for roughly 3 hours each day. And if we're not able to bring kids onto campus, we will then run that program in a live format where teachers will be working primarily in a live format, unlike the virtual environment where it's a hybrid right now of both live and then static instruction. This summer program, if students are identified, would be smaller groups, no more than approximately 15 per group, and teachers conducting live instruction for the better part of those 3 hours, 3 days per week. That's at the elementary level. At the intermediate school, we've run remediation programs over the past several years. They've been funded through Title I funds. So we've run 3 different programs at the intermediate school. The first is Nights in Training. That's a program, again, funded by federal Title I funds, not district funds. And that program is targeted for students who are transitioning into the middle school, 6th graders. And it focuses mostly on social emotional support, as well as organization and transitioning into the middle school. Those students are identified through transition meetings at the 5th and 6th grade transition time. We may need to increase those numbers depending upon the teacher recommendation with the 5th grade teachers. We also run what's called RISP and MISP. They are also summer remediation programs at intermediate school funded by Title I, not district funds. And those are focused on reading and math. And typically the students who are identified for those programs who are students who are performing below grade level based upon several metrics. We anticipate that those numbers may rise based upon students that are impacted by school closure. So we're using that 30% number again as a preliminary projection. But as we get closer to the end of May and teachers begin to make those recommendations, we'll have a more definitive number. And then lastly, at the high school where we have budgeted some funds, again, I think that really the courses that we'll need to focus on, they're not elective classes. We would be looking at algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then English 9 and 10. And the reason that I'm proposing that those courses be the courses we ask teachers to consider summer remediation is algebra is identified as the key mathematics course that's central to all other progressive courses. And so if we have students who are struggling in that course as a result of school closure, that may be the course that we might want to run at the secondary level, as well as geometry and algebra 2. And then language arts in grades 9 and 10, knowing that English 10 is part of the state assessment requirements that will need to really support students who may have some loss and need recovery as a result of school closure. So fewer courses at the high school, and we'll be working with a combination of both local and federal funds at the secondary level to provide some of those summer remediation courses. I thought I would open that up for some questions or comments at this point.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Dr. Gleason, thank you so much. So a couple things that came to my mind immediately in reference to the elementary level. Do you happen to know, now you mentioned 30% you're anticipating maybe at each grade level. Do you know what that percentage was last year?
Dr. Gleason, your microphone's on.
Sorry about that. At the intermediate school, is that what you asked, Mr. Sanfilippo?
No, at the elementary level.
At the elementary level, we did not run summer remediation programs. We ran that SOAR program, which was really for any student that wanted that. That was not a teacher identification program. The
Okay.
only remediation programs that we ran were at the middle school. And I do have numbers for how many students were identified and enrolled there. That was 210 at the intermediate school.
Okay, now if that 30% number happens to go up, I guess let me ask this question first. So you said that the teachers were going to identify students that they felt were going to fall into that 30%. Do we have any guidance for like parents who say, hey, I'm concerned about my kid, going to the next level? I mean, is there any available input for parents in that?
Well, I think we need to begin first with the teacher, not to say we're excluding parent input. I think we'll certainly have input from parents that perhaps their student may not be identified by the teacher, but the parent home with their child may see that their child has been struggling. So we'll have to address that as we get to that. But we're starting with teacher recommendation because obviously the teacher is the instructional leader in the classroom, is providing the assignments, who has evidence of whether the child is meeting the standards at that grade level, not unlike a report card if we were in the regular classroom setting. That's not to negate the fact that a parent may see some additional struggles that the teacher is not seeing. But we're going to begin with teacher recommendation and see what we capture there first before we widen that net.
Okay, and if that number were to go up and we were to be in that kind of live environment again, say in August, would there could there be possible availability to have more teachers or the need for more teachers to be involved in this program? I don't know if they're doing it live, and I know it's hard when you got 5 kids as opposed to 20 kids Zooming and different things like that. Maybe your thoughts on that as well.
Well, the preliminary projections are that we're trying to limit the number to no more than 15, which would be considered a small group in general education. This is outside of extended school year with special education. That's a different program. So if we're bringing the class size down to no more than 15, we anticipate that will be manageable for Google Meets and Zoom or the digital platform. Again, I think it's like all the other unknowns right now, it's difficult to give some specific answers. This is going to rely a lot upon first identifying who the first round of students are, trying to ascertain how many teachers that we have willing to teach either in that virtual or live environment in August. And then also looking at a second round of recommendations that may come through from parents. But all of this, just know, is on the radar for possibilities that we have to look at.
Adam, you had a question? Oh, sorry. Adam?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Gleason. My question has to do with going into next year and how this is all going to kind of flow together. Let's say we do the summer programs, they allow live instruction. Going into the beginning of next year, at what point will we start seeing data come back that shows whether there's any gaps that are left over that we have to fill in before the end of next school year?
It's a great question. First thing we're going to be doing is, fortunately, we have digital benchmarks in place. We will probably roll those benchmarks back to the prior grade where appropriate. So for example, if a student is in 5th grade, we may have to do a 4th grade benchmark to see how well that student mastered the 4th grade standards, so we can start to create some kind of gap analysis. We've talked about this before. We're aware that September is going to look very different than prior Septembers, and the curriculum is going to have to be adjusted accordingly, where we allow time to repace the curriculum, remediate some of those foundational skills that students may have missed. We may also have to adjust some funding for additional supplemental programming, whether that's before or after school during the school year, especially if we don't have good enrollment in the summer. And that's a possibility that, parents will not want their students in a virtual environment or a live environment in the summer after what's been a challenging end of the school year. So because those funds are already in the budget, we may have to get a little creative about how we'll run those programs supplementally at the beginning of the school year also. But we do have metrics in place that we can roll back to the prior year in most cases. Gets a little trickier at the secondary level when you're talking about very different kinds of courses that are prerequisite to other courses, chemistry and physics and things like that. We don't have metrics in place for those that are standardized benchmarks, but we do for ELA and math at most grades through at least middle school level.
Dr. Cram?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a different answer or an additional answer to Adam's question. We're dealing with this as it being two separate problems. The first problem is what we're talking about tonight, and Dr. Gleason explained the kind of supplementary programs that we're hoping to be able to offer this summer. And that would be for the individual student who wasn't doing as well as he or she might have been able to do if they were in school. The other question is the efficacy or the effectiveness of the curriculum. I'm sure there are going to be some things that because of the online environment, we didn't get to cover, or at least cover as well as they were in school. There are going to be situations where they just didn't lend themselves to a virtual learning environment, things that can be better taught to students face to face. And so what we're looking for is when we open up in September is to kind of have an inventory of those issues, curriculum issues that we can kind of design maybe the first month, maybe the first 6 weeks of school. We're not sure yet. Of a review and remediation that would address specifically the things that we don't think any of the students were able to get, in the learning environment. So we're going to try to fill that gap. So there's two different things there. One is the individual student performance, and the other is the effectiveness of the curriculum in this environment.
Erin?
Thank you.
Okay, so my comments basically tie into Chris's discussion before, but really paying attention to the validity of the student's achievement at this point. I'm sure we have a lot of parents, I for myself, I'm very cognizant of showing me your work before you submit it kind of mentality. So I don't know if that is really, the expectation of what, the student is submitting without remediation from a parent. So factoring that all into, student achievement during this virtual learning is really going to be important to provide the support. Another idea I'm thinking of is maybe, opening it up to have a flexible tiered system for the summer. So if we have the possibility to have an in-class, learning environment for summer remediation, maybe parents can choose that. Maybe some parents don't feel, safe yet to send their students back if everything's lifted and they feel more comfortable with a live opportunity for their student to receive summer remediation. Or students or parents maybe feel that their child is making progress, but they're somewhat concerned of the summer slide mentality, and they just want some virtual support of maybe a Google Classroom so it's like a 3-tiered system, basically to differentiate between all the different learners and give parents the option to provide that remediation for the summer. I think that flexibility would just be key at this point.
I think that that's definitely something we can consider. And I think that takes into account the fact that, a teacher may have a recommendation based upon one set of criteria and a parent is looking through a different lens. And as we know, the validity of the work that is being submitted right now, as such, parents, especially at the elementary level, are helping their students their children as we expect they would be, unlike if a child was submitting work or completing work in the classroom. So you might be getting a different validity of work. And I think that's appropriate to where we are, but we need definitely a different metric by measuring that. And I think that's why that benchmark coming in when they're back in class under the supervision of a teacher is going to be really important to, as you say, validate where they really are with mastery of the standards. So I think that's a good suggestion. And definitely as we're starting to develop kind of the framework for this program, that we can take that into account.
Russell, you had a question?
Yes, Lisa, I don't know if this has been discussed at your curriculum meetings and such, or it's premature based on what you've been saying, but the inclination perhaps for some parents to maybe want to hold their child back, and a policy about that if they don't feel as though they were doing well before this, and this has exasperated that, and how do we manage that, and how does that change the grade count, so on and so forth, potentially. Maybe that's too early, but just something to be concerned about maybe.
Certainly something to think about, and wouldn't be completely unlikely that might be recommended, particularly I think at the younger grades, kindergarten, first grade. So I think we have to really look at, we're in a very unique situation. We will have to look at our current policy, and that will be something we'll have to bring the board into discussion as those cases may arise. So thank you for suggesting that we take a look at that. It's definitely on our radar.
Dr. Gleason?
Yes.
So a couple things. One, has there been any talk, because I've seen some stories about other districts that are just going to pass fail when it comes to the grading system. Have we looked into anything like that or talked about it at all? Is there pros or cons?
Yeah, we talk about pass fail. It's on our weekly administrative agenda. And we also discuss that both at the county superintendent's roundtable as well as the county curriculum directors roundtable. And there are some districts doing that, but some are selecting when they're doing pass fail. One of the items we're discussing is pass fail, not in the academic areas, but more at the specials area, especially at the elementary level, where it's a little more difficult for some of the students to get to the work. It's a different schedule than at secondary, where it's actually one of their courses that they may go to every single day. So we are in discussion about pass fail for just fourth marking period, and maintaining their grades from the first through third marking period as long as no child is harmed by that. And it's really important that whatever procedures we put into place as a result of this school closure, that no child is harmed by that, whatever that policy may be. So if a child was doing poorly and was counting on the fourth marking period to bring his or her grade up, we want to make sure that there's a pathway for him or her to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
Go ahead.
my second question is something that's a little outside of the box, I guess. Talking about remediation and you know, going to what Russell even said, if parents decide, you know what, I don't feel my child is at the point where they should maybe move ahead a grade. Has there ever been discussion, thought as to, like, when we go back to school in the fall, that all the students start where they left off, let's say, for like a month of review, and then, you know, kind of catch them up. It's a very intense month of review, and then, you know, they move ahead where to fifth grade goes on to the intermediate school. Could something like that be done? Has anything?
Yeah,
I mean,
we discussed that, which can make sense for some grades, but it leaves lots of students without a home. So you have your kindergarten students entering that would have nowhere to be because you'd be moving first graders back to their kindergarten teacher. So it displaces certain students. It also creates some issues with the transition grades, with eighth graders enrolled in courses in high school and then bringing them back to their eighth grade year. You can kind of see how that has a domino effect. So it might work in like a first through fourth grade, or maybe a sixth and seventh grade, but it doesn't work globally through the district. We did discuss it. We've been discussing, as I said, every week, a lot of different options, as well as, you know, bringing those conversations through the county and seeing if anyone else has some innovative ideas. And we've all tossed around these various ideas. But I think it really comes back to how are we adjusting the curriculum, as well as the superintendents are petitioning the state to push back testing for the 2021 school year, so that if we have a month of remediation in the courses that we can remediate, that it gives us a whole other month on the other end for testing. So if we need the month of September, 4 to 5 weeks into October to kind of go back and see where students miss standards and to reteach those standards, students aren't being tested in April, that they might be tested either late May or early June. So that's one area that we're looking at to sort of try to balance some of where these standards gaps may be.
So if you look at all the students, and I understand globally, you know, it would work better in some grades than others. Would the grade that would possibly be the most affected when in talks of in terms of remediation, let's say when they move from one grade to the next, would that be like a fifth grade to sixth grade? Since you're moving from maybe a 1 or 2 class teacher environment to multiple teachers, where it's a specialty of science and different things, where in the elementary schools, it's more of a general ed type thing where they teach a multitude of subjects. Would they be more at a disadvantage than other students, or do you think they'd be okay?
Well,
think
one of
we-
the things,
Go ahead,
one
Dr.
of the
Crab.
things we haven't really talked enough about are those transitions. You know, having met with the middle school and the high school over the past couple of days, there are a lot of transition activities. There are a lot of things that are done with eighth graders normally this time of year, preparing them for going to high school. I mean, from the simplest things as, you know, how do I open my locker, to, you know, making good choices for course selections. And the same thing happens between the elementary schools and the middle school. We haven't had the opportunity, because the kids are not in school, to conduct those transition activities. So I think it may be important. We're talking about remediation in the summer. We may also have to have some activities in the summer, if it's permissible at that point, to affect some of those transitions, because it's a big step for those kids to go from one building to the next. There are a lot of different things they need to get used to, and we really haven't had the opportunity with the schools being closed. I mean, they're doing some things virtually. The high school people were meeting with the eighth graders, I guess, this week virtually, answering questions, those kinds of things. But we may have to try to plan a couple of those activities where the kids will physically come to those buildings, maybe in late August, so that we can get those things out of the way and they can hit the ground running in September.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any other questions? No, seeing none. Dr. Gleason?
Yeah, the only other item, thank you. Well, let me just kind of wrap up summer programs. With regard to Summer Night Academy, again, that program has had limited enrollment at the elementary grades 2 through 5. We've been able to run approximately 4 or 5 courses, tops, out of dozens that we offer. So at the intermediate level, we've been successful with a handful of arts courses, one being the all-wall theater camp, summer theater camp, as well as some of the arts classes such as pottery and art. Those have been successful, and we've had enough enrollment to run those. At the high school, really the only success we've had with Summer Night Academy have been the Get Ready for AP courses. And those are courses we offer as sort of a bridge to get ready for the rigor of a variety of advanced placement courses. And in speaking to the administration, where we really have to focus our energies on these summer remediation programs and what they're going to look like, I would not recommend that we run a breadth, even offer a breadth of Summer Night Academy courses. They're not really a revenue source, and very few really meet the enrollment figures to run at the elementary level for sure. At the intermediate, the courses that have been successful that have run, all-wall theater camp and the arts classes with Mr. Ryan, those require face-to-face interaction. So I think we're going to have to sort of be in a wait and see mode before we can offer those courses to see if that's something we can run in August. We wouldn't be able to begin advertising them and trying to collect payment when we're not sure if we'll be able to bring students in. At the high school level, I believe we can run the Summer Night Academy Get Ready for AP courses, because those are typically 5-day classes, and they can be run virtually. The teacher can do those with enrolled students in a virtual format, and they really support the students. They're not enrichment classes. They're really a summer readiness class to get ready for the rigor of AP. And we wouldn't run those again until August. So I'll be back to you with more regarding Summer Night Academy, but we will not be rolling out this time of year. Normally, I would be presenting to you the Summer Night Academy course catalog. We will not be putting that together this year, particularly with regard to the restrictions on any kind of live face-to-face classes. Okay, any questions on Summer Night Academy? Okay, the last item is just a quick update on the evaluation of educators. We've had, as you know, March 23rd, the governor signed into Executive Order 117, and I brought that to your attention back in March. That executive order waived state testing. It then had numerous impacts on other areas of ESSA, which is the federal guidelines, and it removed the requirement for teachers to have an SGO, a student growth objective. It removed the requirement for teachers to have a student growth percentile, which is part of their evaluation that comes from the state assessment. All of those have been waived as part of the COVID school closure. What we just recently became aware of is that the requirement for summative evaluations has been articulated. Tenured teachers, tenured educators, meaning certificated staff, both teachers and education service professionals, if they are tenured, they will not get a summative evaluation this year. They will get a summative rating of NE, which is non-evaluated. For non-tenured teachers, teachers in their first 4 years in the district, or provisional teachers who are still working on standardizing their certification, they must receive a summative rating based upon at least 2 observations. Now, what has happened across the state is that not every non-tenured teacher had a second observation. They might have had a second observation scheduled for March 18th, and we closed and they weren't able to get that second observation. It's important that we give them a summative rating where possible so that they can continue to have an effective rating. So the state provided us last week guidance around providing a portfolio observation, and I wanted to make the board aware of that in case you're hearing of this portfolio observation. The portfolio observation provides that second observation, but it's a window of time. So the administrator can retrieve artifacts from the teacher. The teacher decides what the artifacts are, and they could be anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 different artifacts that satisfies the various domains of the teacher evaluation instrument. So we've completed approximately 14 or 15 of these observation portfolio observations so that we're able to provide those non-tenured teachers with a summative rating. And that's the latest update on what's happening with teacher evaluation as a result of school closure. We are not able to evaluate any teacher in the virtual environment. All observations have to reflect teacher performance prior to March 16th when we were officially closed. Any questions on teacher evaluation and that update? Okay, if no questions, that takes us through curriculum instruction.
Thank you, Dr. Gleason.
You're welcome.
Mr. Smythe, Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gartz.
Brian, I would turn it over to you if that's all right.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. With regard to the agenda, a little lengthier, but perhaps a little bit more concise with regard to the discussion, but we'll open up each item. With regard to the update on the enterprise accounts, food service is still operating on the positive sense. The program is still providing meals to free and reduced, and we actually had an increase in participation this week based on a note we included in Dr. Gleason's daily updates advising how to contact our food service department if their circumstances have changed, or if they had initially declined when first contacted when we went to virtual learning and their circumstances changed or they changed their mind and they wanted to participate. So we did have an increase. That's a positive. Unfortunately for that enterprise account, the only revenue coming in is the reimbursements for the free and reduced meals. So for the month of April, the loss based on expenses and the limited revenue was $65,000 for the month, and year to date through the end of April is $75,000 at this point.
Brian, with that, it should be noted that all, we're paying salaries for all district employees, and food service employees come specifically out of that account. So to kind of put it all in perspective.
Absolutely. All the expenses for the food service program come from that account, and as required by statute, all employees of the district continue to get paid as though school was in session. That would include the food service employees as well. So yes, we're currently maintaining our payroll in the department, and the only revenue source we have is the reimbursements on the free and reduced program.
And the other thing I found out this week too was that I believe the state opened it up to any family that's suffering a hardship now. They qualify automatically. All they have to do is notify us, and they can get a, I guess, free and reduced lunch, and it's provided by the district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's something else that just changed in the last few days, that anybody that has a hardship now qualifies, and there's no, I guess, checking or anything of that nature with it. So we'd anticipate seeing some of these numbers to even creep up a little more.
Yeah, the application process has changed. I think they've suspended the actual application process, but if anybody's looking for assistance or knows of anybody who's looking for assistance with regard to free and reduced, they can contact our food service department. We prefer by email, but they can also leave a message. The information is included in the daily report that Dr. Gleason provides. Okay.
Anybody have any questions? No?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
The details are still coming out from the state with regards to getting reimbursements for anything. Have you heard anything, Brian or Ralph, on reimbursements for these costs that are sitting in our enterprise account because of the food service?
Well, all our food is reimbursed. I can tell you that much, but outside of that, I haven't heard anything. Brian, do you?
With regard to the reimbursement, that's specific to the free and reduced program, the child nutrition program that we participate in. What we're also doing is we're trying to see how the Paycheck Protection Act could be applied to the food service. It is an enterprise account. It's not publicly funded with state aid or taxpayer funds. So I'm trying to make the argument that that would apply. We've contacted the Department of Education regarding that. Also, with regard to the CARES Act, seeing what funds could be utilized to support the enterprise accounts as well. There's also an upcoming meeting where we'll be applying to FEMA, for assistance as well, and whatever costs that we could apply for with regard to losses, including this food service program as well as the WRAP program, we're going to be including in those applications.
Okay, so worst case scenario at the end of the year, I mean, we trended pretty high last month, but I mean, we could be looking at $150,000 hole that we have to fill. Worst case.
I would say the worst case is probably about 200,000.
Okay, even worse.
I'm hoping that's going to be the worst case scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Brian, another question with this, and then Russell. So the government changed the requirements now. So anybody that's having a hardship automatically qualifies, and I guess they're being reimbursed 100%. How does that affect the people that were on the reduced lunch program? Are they now 100% funded and we're not collecting money from them? Or do they have to make a different application to us to transition over?
No, our understanding is that even if you were previously free and reduced, that you're currently free.
Okay, and so our reimbursements reflect that then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's the premise we're currently operating under.
Okay, thank you. Russell?
Brian, do we have any exposure to feeding and food during the summer, or does it take a couple months off, or does it depend on if we run summer programs?
It's only for our school program. It's our school year, I apologize.
Thank you.
My understanding is, didn't the governor put something out that we have to provide until the last week of June?
In all honesty, I'd have to follow up on that.
I thought I saw that someplace, but I mean, we still have time, so that's not an issue. Any other questions on food? No? Okay.
Also in the packet is the tuition, the WRAP program tuition fees that are the same as the current year, but they would be on the agenda for approval next week so that we can start providing notice and advertising those tuition rates for registration for next school year.
Brian, with this, there's a discount included in this if someone has multiple children?
Yeah.
Are we doing, we are, okay. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay.
Okay. With regard to item 2, the facility use applications, entities that were inquiring with regard to running summer camps within our school facilities, namely the gymnasiums, have been advised that we will not be permitting any indoor camps We are still reviewing facility use applications on a case-by-case basis. However, it is very unlikely that we would be approving any facility use unless it was directly related to students within our community, or yes, students within our community. Additionally, facility use applications that were previously applied obviously have been canceled both by those entities as well as by the district. Any question on facility use? Okay. With regard to the Open Public Records Act, I'm only going to report this month that we currently year to date have 125 requests, 7 requests which are outstanding with regard to providing a response. All requests except for the 7 have received a response. There are a number of requests that still require a follow-up response with regard to providing records. We've asked for extensions. Initially, we utilized 7 days beyond May 15th, which was the earliest date that we were going to be able to return to school. Based on the most recent announcement, we're going to have to reevaluate our staffing and our ability to respond to these requests, and we'll follow up accordingly. At this stage, the staff within this office have been operating or working remotely and only coming into the office to perform tasks that are necessary can only be performed while in the office, and those tasks that are deemed essential for the continued operation of the district. But that's the status of our OPA request, 125 year to date at this point.
Anybody have any questions? Seeing none.
The projects update, the one large project that is ongoing is the HVAC project, majority of which is at Central School and Allenwood Elementary School, and a small portion at Old Mill Elementary School. With school being closed, we've allowed the contractor to perform work within the buildings. And we were scheduling the work so that we would have an opportunity prior to resuming school. And again, we were initially gauging May 15th as the date, so that they would stop the work. We would allow more than 2 weeks without them in the buildings, and we can also perform our cleaning prior to resuming school. Now that notice has been provided that school will be closed for the remainder of the year, we're working out a schedule with the contractor to look to continue the work at this point moving forward, and hope considerably earlier than originally anticipated when the work was going to be conducted over the summer. That would be obvious. And part of the reason for that was one, we have the ability to do the work now, but also to make those school buildings available for programs that may be offered in the summer. But there's a schedule forthcoming. There's still some things that we need to work out with regard to access to the building, but that is ongoing. Any question on the HVAC project? I'll loop into this category with regard to district cleaning of the buildings. Now that school is, the announcement school will be closed for the remainder of the year. We're going to start looking at performing our summer cleaning early in order to get certain projects done, and again, to make the buildings available in the summer to accommodate the programs that were previously discussed on the curriculum instruction. But there's a number of details that we still have to work out with regard to that.
And Brian, with that, it would be, students coming in, collecting their personal belongings, and teachers wrapping up their classrooms for the year.
Yeah, maybe not that solution, but those are the 2 issues that we need to address. First is staff closing down their classrooms for the year, and also what to do with the personal belongings of the students, how we're going to handle that. And once we work that out, then we'll continue working out the schedule with regard to performing summer cleaning at this stage.
Anybody? Adam, you had a question?
Can you just, or somebody give us an update quick on the trailers while we're here?
Sure. We're currently waiting on approval from the Department of Education We're in the process of fulfilling the requirements for applying for a building permit from the municipality so that we can proceed with the work. And the county's, Monmouth County Public Works is on board to perform the work as soon as we give them the notice that we have all our approvals.
So our last piece is hearing from Trenton.
That and actually obtaining the building permit, but yes, we're looking to obtain approval from the Department of Education.
Okay.
And Brian, it's been quite a while since we submitted that request to the Department of Education, correct?
January.
And just for the record too, Dr. Cram has made some phone calls to try to assist in speeding that along. Okay, any other questions for Brian? No? Okay, Brian, next.
Okay, we have purchased of school buses. We discussed this when we reviewed the budget. Included in the budget is the purchase of 4 Type 1 school buses, or the large 54-passenger school buses, and 1 school van. As we discussed during the public hearing, the 4 school buses are not replacements. They are anticipation of, having multiple school buses be required to be retired over the next couple of years. So we are currently going to hold off on making the purchase of those 4 school buses because, again, they're not replacements. However, the school van, the Type 2, which is mainly used for special education students, is a replacement. So we're going to look to move forward with the purchase of the 1 school van. And the reason for holding off on the purchase of the 4 school buses is because of the unknown with regard to what's going to happen with state aid and the additional revenue sources that we rely on. So, we're looking at a number of items, but this is one particular item at this stage that we would normally look to place the order at this point so that we can have delivery in the fall, hopefully prior to the start of school. But because they're not replacements, we're going to hold off.
Brian, the 4 buses that we were anticipating replacing, how many years of service do they have in them? Do you know that offhand?
I would have to, there's a couple buses being replaced next year. So I would say 2 of them are at 14 years. And then I believe there's another 3 that probably have 13 years because I think the schedule is like 2. I know there's 20 over the next 4 years, and I know there's 10 in the last, and then there's 5. So I think it goes 2, 3, 5, and 10 is the order in which we will be retiring buses. So if you're talking about 4 of them, they have either 13 or 14 years on them.
So, but keeping in mind too, that the way that you've been trying to, average it out. So 1 year, there's not a major hit. Could this potentially, hurt us down the line where we have a large number of buses coming due and then we have to put a large amount of money towards them?
Absolutely. But that would only be if we ultimately do not purchase the buses in the current year. I'm not saying we're not purchasing them. We're just not doing it at this time.
Okay.
Because it's not imperative that we have them for September because they're not replacements. The 4 buses that we would replace them with, but they would only become spares. So at this stage, we'll still hold the funds in that account. And if we have the ability to during the school year, we would still look to purchase those buses so that we can maintain the schedule we've developed.
Okay. Russell, you had a question?
I think Brian just answered my question. I think it's prudent that we're looking at ways to defer monies in these times until we see what the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks brings, as everything's changing rapidly. And it's important to understand that we reserve the right to still buy the buses if the budget heals up. It doesn't seem as bad as maybe we're anticipating, and that's certainly what we would do. But I think it's wise to do what we've, the decision at this point.
Thank you.
That's also the explanation for why we're moving forward with the school bus van, because that will be required in September.
Adam?
Can you elaborate? I mean, you kind of mentioned why, but I think we're looking at the possibility of having cash flow issues at some point in the future if state aid and our local share of revenue dries up. Has there been any talk about, and I know, besides having to take out a loan or anything temporarily, but has there been anything out of the state that's come in addition to what we've spoken about at least last week on the budget call?
No, not as of yet. The one state aid payment would be that we already anticipate that we're not going to receive perhaps at all, but at the earliest, it would not be September because the state's delayed, the start of their next fiscal year or the approval of their budget. So we normally don't receive that until July because they wait for the following budget to actually fund our June payment. So if that's not going to happen until September, what we typically would receive in the first or second week in July, we don't anticipate until September, and quite possibly may not receive it at all. And with a revised state budget, we had an increase in state aid. However, that may no longer be the case, and we may end up actually with a cut in state aid, but we have not received any additional information with regard to that at this point.
The size of this state aid payment that we are potentially losing, how much is it?
About $340,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, next item is professional extraordinary services. Just to have the discussion, the committee, the Finance and Facilities Committee is going to be meeting in committee to review in more detail the actual responses that were received, but we did receive the responses. That information has been provided to the Board of Education. I just didn't know if there would be any general comments or questions that we may have. And this is for the attorney services, auditor services, and property and casualty insurance broker services. The banking RFP will be going out this month with the plan for the board to be acting on it at the June meeting, along with these RFPs.
Anybody have any questions?
And again, the schedule is going to dictate, reviewing all the applications, which there was a number of responses, scheduling interviews, and then for the recommendations that would be made to the board. Additionally, we have the 2021 annual appointments. There's actually more than what we have on the agenda. I think we have A through Z and then AA through VV in addition. Any of the appointments that would involve, the appointment of a superintendent have been held off until June, but so as not to overwhelm the Board of Education. We split this over 2 months. Normally 100% are done in May, but we're going to do it over the course of May and June. However, are there any questions on any of the items that are included? If there are, and these would be items that would be action items at next week's business meeting. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So in regards to section CC, when it goes over receiving regular education tuition and student rates. So to get some background in this, I kind of researched a bunch of different districts in the surrounding areas. Where we stand is significantly lower than where larger scale districts are. I'm just bringing this up, because we have a lot of concerns with our general education classes, and we're seeing them at high student teacher ratios. And so, I'll give you some examples of what I researched. Ocean, who's a larger school district, multiple school buildings, K through 4, they're charging $8,500. Okay, 5 through 8, $8,500. High school for student tuition is $13,500. We have surrounding districts who are much smaller, but HW Mounts, they're listed at $6,000 per student, and that's over our rate. So where's another one? Avon was $4,500 and St. Rose was $6,700. So those are just some ones I were easily able to access, in researching. Other comparable districts I wasn't able to pull up, but I'm just thinking, the primary staying at 3,000 seems to be, the the general trend in early education around about number. Plus, we also want to consider that, you know, we need the integrated programs of the general education students with students who have special needs mandated in their IEP. So, but my concern with the elementary, I just wanted to kind of bring it up for discussion and see what everyone else's thoughts are in regards to this. Brian, do you know how many students we currently receive from out of district tuition in not receiving special services, not in regards to anything like that, but just general ed students?
There's a little more than 20 students attending.
So, okay. Is there like a significant grade, or, you know, are they kind of spread throughout the district? Like, or are they in high school? Are they in intermediate? Are they in elementary? Or does it vary?
More elementary, but we'll provide that information to the full board.
Okay. Does anyone else have any, you know, concerns regarding this, or?
Go ahead, Chris. You had a question?
Mine was going to go back to the RFP, so I'll let Aaron finish.
Oh, okay. Russell had a question. Russell?
Yeah, Aaron, I think this is a valid fact that I think we can look at in committee for sure. And I guess, Brian, I would ask, when's the last time that we evaluated our prices for those and compared them to kind of the market rates? Or are those just the numbers we've had for any period of time?
No, they actually only came about a few years ago. And I could tell you the mindset of it was to be very affordable, with the idea of bringing revenue into the district, with the mindset of the district has the ability to approve or not approve students, because depending on class size and enrollment, et cetera, the superintendent does not have to approve the request for students to attend the district. However, if there's, 18 students in a class, it's not a significant cost to have 19 students in that class from an operational or supply standpoint. Now, obviously, that's significantly different. It causes an additional section to be required, but the mindset is that that's not how it would be applied, in that it would not be increasing sections. So therefore, it's a revenue source, and that was the idea behind the tuition rate that was established by the Board of Education.
So that's good that it's new. I think perhaps maybe we should evaluate where we're at. I understand the price point being welcoming, it's revenue, but if our reputation is solid from a business model, maybe we can afford to move it up a notch or two. So maybe we should look at that in committee.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Chris, you had a question about the RFPs?
Yeah, just is the F&F committee going to do like interviews, or are we just collecting the papers, or that the bids through paper? Are you guys gonna do any Zoom meetings or anything like that?
Russell, you want to answer?
The plan is to evaluate obviously what we've gotten in, Chris, and then certainly interview at least 3, depending on how many we have, and maybe, a number or 2 more, depending on what the qualifications are and such. And then come back with recommendations for the whole board discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you, Russ.
Anybody have any other questions? Brian, you have anything else?
Well, only that with the most recent announcement with regard to school being closed for the remainder of the year, we're going to be reviewing the current year budget and looking at purchase orders that were established for the year and where cost savings is going to be realized by the district. I mean, we were anticipating, and as we discussed as part of the budget process, we included funds, additional funds into next year's budget for, summer programs, for, continued virtual learning into next school year. But we were doing that with the anticipation that we'd be closed, but we also thought perhaps that we may be returning this school year. Now that that has changed, we're going to continue to be reviewing the budget and modifying purchase orders and bringing that information back to the F&F committee for discussion. Or as to see how that could be used to address perhaps revenue shortfalls in next school year, and for planning purposes to address, projects moving forward for the district.
Brian, when do you think you'll have an idea of, some of the savings that we've incurred from less electricity, less gas purchases and things like that, that'll help offset, other costs that we have?
I think we discussed this, and business administrator would never reveal that information, but it would probably be in June. I mean, we have another month. We're going to use the month to be identifying it. So, some things are going to be more difficult for us with regard to like utilities. I mean, obviously substitute usage, substitute costs are easily identifiable because, we won't be utilizing them. We can compare usage of fuel, from like last 2 years or last year to this year, year to date or moving forward, which we'll continue to do. Utilities depend on, like, we're doing construction at 2 schools, so sometimes that plays. I mean, we're playing, the buildings are in unoccupied mode right now, which should result in considerable savings. Prior to this, it would have been in heating costs, and moving forward, it's going to be in cooling costs. So we should realize the savings, but I wouldn't commit to knowing that perhaps until we actually see the invoices.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions?
And just as a follow-up to that, it'll be June where the Board of Education will be making decisions on what to do with anticipated balances out of the current year. We'll have a resolution at the June Board of Education meeting for the purposes of putting funds into maintenance reserve, emergency reserve, and capital reserve funds. Capital reserve accounts, sorry.
Okay. Anything else, Brian, or is that it?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, that's it. Okay, great. One thing I wanted to mention before we open public comment is that it is Teacher Week. So on behalf of the Board of Education, the administration, anybody out there that's a teacher, our own Erin is a teacher, want to say thank you to all of you for all your hard work and everything you're doing. We certainly realize, and I think everybody realizes that what you're doing now is certainly much harder than some of the stuff you do in the classroom. So we certainly appreciate everything you're doing. I believe the parents certainly appreciate it. And, with it being a Teacher Appreciation Week, I think saying thank you to the parents who are also, being teachers as well at home, want to say thank you to them for everything they're doing. It's certainly a team effort, and as the days go by, everybody's getting better at it. But we are very fortunate that we have incredible teachers in our district who every day do incredible things, and it's remarkable the things that are going on. So thank you to everybody. With that,
Ralph,
yes.
I'd like to say that May 1st was also National Principal Day, which was, So, and they all started out as teachers. We don't want to overshadow the teachers on their day tomorrow, but May 1st was National Principals, Vice Principals Day, and they're all part of the team too. So kudos to all of them.
Absolutely. They
and their leadership.
Yep, they help steer the ship and give the support to the teachers to do the things they do. So certainly we have incredible principals in this district too. I mean, administration up and down. So we are very fortunate and certainly grateful for all their hard work. Dr. Graham, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words about educational technology, if I can, because we sent a survey out last week to find out if there were still homes that needed Chromebooks or technology support, and the survey came back with a considerable number of people still needing equipment. We were able to put together a distribution of Chromebooks to the elementary students this week with the help of the operations department and the technology department. They were able to get the computers tagged and out to the individual homes. We also established a delivery process for computer replacements. that started working this week, and instructions went out to the community as to how you put your ticket in and let people know what they need to do. Teachers will still have to come to the buildings, unfortunately, to swap out their computers, but I think we kind of have a computer Uber program going on this week, and from early indications, it's going pretty well. The other thing in the area of technology, I met with the technology department last week, and one of the things we talked about was a technology plan that is being developed. I've seen a rough draft of it, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to present something to the board for discussion, perhaps as early as June, on a multi-year technology plan, because if we've learned nothing from this experience is that the infrastructure and the equipment that we have is critically important to the educational process. And so we need to make sure we're prepared for this should it happen again. And if I can slip into new business for a moment, Mr. President,
Yes.
the thing that has been trending on my email is graduation. And we were, of course, quietly planning, virtual ceremonies, the traditional ceremonies, thinking about other alternatives. And when the governor announced, I think it was only yesterday, that schools would be closed through June, the schools have begun to work in earnest on a way to celebrate the commencement exercises for both the intermediate school and the high school with something virtually, holding out the hope that if there is a relaxation in the regulations, we can have an in-person commencement exercises sometime this summer. So that's the plan right now. I've been responding to as many of the emails as I can. I'll get to the rest of them by tomorrow. But the message is that right now we are looking at a virtual alternative with the idea that we will eventually be able to hold an in-person graduation ceremony for the high school if the regulations are relaxed sometime this summer.
Thank you. Yes, that was something I also wanted to touch on, that we certainly all feel very strong about the fact graduations are extremely important. I mean, it's a milestone in a person's life, and it's something you remember for the rest of your lives. I mean, certainly we all remember our graduations. So we will certainly, as a district, do anything that is legally allowed to eventually have an actual physical graduation, that we can get everybody together and celebrate the accomplishments of 12 plus years in the Wall Township schools and all your achievements. So we all feel very strongly about that, administration and the board. So certainly something that we've talked about, honestly, since week 2 of the school closure. Myself and Dr. Gleason had conversations about that. Just keeping it in the back of our mind, just looking ahead, just in case something like this happened. And unfortunately, something like this did happen. We are closed for the rest of the year, but we will continue to explore every option possible so we can do this. And certainly, if there's any other ideas of things that maybe we can do to create some memories for these students, please share them with us. And if we can legally do them, we will do them. Any board members have anything? No? Okay. Seeing none, I will open public comment. Go to sometimes it unmutes and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. Ms. Cross?
Hi, it's Betsy. Yeah, if you could go over again, what was the hiring of the superintendent? I thought there was an email that went out today to staff that you were going to make an announcement on Friday. So if you could go over that, I'd appreciate it. Could you let me know who was in executive session? You talked about confidential matters, litigation, personnel matters. Was there an attorney in the back? One thing kind of jumped out, Mr. Ebenezer, you're talking to Mr. Cram about putting in calls to the DOE to kind of maybe rush along getting rid of the trailers. I don't want anybody rushing anything along getting rid of the trailers. Until there's an investigation done, I don't even think you should be putting in phone calls. If Mr. Cram could give us an update on what he's done with the investigation of the trailers and where he's getting his information from, I have thousands of pages that I will gladly hand him over to him. And Mr. Smythe is delaying quite a few documents. If Mr. Lee is working, Mr. Lee can get on the survey and get me the documents I'm requesting, just like the DOE has gotten to me and other districts that I have reached out to. It's just Mr. Smythe that seems to be delaying things. Under your new supervision of construction policy 7243, Mr. Cram, could you go over, was that a recommendation for Strauss Esme? If that was not, I do not want that voted on tonight. I think we need a lot more details during a pandemic. We shouldn't be rushing something through. That talks about what our business administrators should be doing and updating on construction, because we know what has been happening in the past has, Mr. Smythe was not doing what he shouldn't have been doing. Mr. Smythe, can you answer tonight? Did you have anyone cap off any of the utilities? If we could get an answer tonight, and if you did have somebody cap them off, could you let me know who it was? I did put in an Oprah to Mr. Smythe and an identical Oprah to Lester Richens, and I think it was 19 pages Mr. Smythe withheld. So, Mr. Cram, if you could let me know, who should I report that to? Should I report that directly to you? Should I report it to another state agency? Because I found it very disturbing. I'd like a list of who was on this phone call tonight. I couldn't even tell that Mr. Garth was on the phone call. He was the rude person that told us to suck it on a Sunday. I thought that you're required to list who's on here, especially your Board of Ed members. Mr. Smythe, could you let us know tonight, do you have a fully executed contract with the lender, Chase? Mr. Nasser told me that you had purchase orders, but you don't have any purchase orders that are dated, signed, and you don't have one for your first payment. To me, it looks like maybe your first payment was a wire transfer. And if you could let me know if your first payment was and who it went to, because I cannot tell from any of the documents that you've given me, which I'm going to send into the DOE. I did send that email to you today, and it's going to go to the Commissioner of Education as well as everybody on that board, because there are so many unanswered questions 8 months later. I have to say, as a parent, not happy with the online teaching that's going on. You're really going to have to do a lot better. You should send out a survey to the parents. We're due for another survey. So many parents are unhappy and they're all afraid to speak up. It's embarrassing that you didn't even send out an email that you'd be going over all this tonight. Nobody knew. Majority of people didn't know you'd even be doing it, and Lisa would be going over what you're doing so far and talking about summer. It's kind of disappointing that, you can look to do a lot more online in the summer than you can look to do online now. Like, why aren't you doing it now? My son maybe has 3 people in attendance on each class, 3. And I'm not taking it out of the teachers. I'm taking it out on the people I'm looking at right now. So unless you put the rules in place, nobody's going to do it. I mean, all these other schools are doing it. They've been online for 6 weeks, and now we're here just trying to start and figure it out. Going back to the trailers, there is no listing of the vendor name, the price, or anything you bought. And from talking to Bernie Paella in the DOE, a lot of flaws in what was happening. And one of them that I think is relevant here is overexpending a capital project. And it says, under the New Jersey Code of Criminal Justice, Title 2C of the New Jersey statute, it's a crime for a public official or employee to knowingly disperse, order, or vote for disbursement of money or incur obligations in excess of appropriations. And I think we had that here on the trailers, because you did a lease purchase agreement in August. You're shaking your head, Mr. Nasser, so you can answer my question. Thank you. Thank you. Answer my question. He signed a lease purchase agreement, but he didn't have the prices. He didn't have the vendors. And then he was getting bids months later. And I think even installed the gym floor 2 years later.
Ms. Cross, your time is up.
That's not the way lease purchases work. So please answer all my questions tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Durant?
Good evening, Kathleen Duran, Wall Township. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Mangan for finally asking the questions from the board's mouth about the cost of out-of-district students attending Wall. That issue has been raised for years, at least the past 3 years, by Betsy Cross. I know because I've been there, she's never received a response, because what we've been trying to do is see if the cost that we are offering to these out-district students who are coming in comes close to meeting the cost of actually educating the student. And the cost we're using is Dr. Gleason's Department of Education taxpayer guide. And it's very simple math, as you've discovered. I'm just glad to hear a board member echo it. Because I think it's a question that I understand underselling the competition. I understand we got to undercut Manasquan and Point Beach to try to get students to come, but we are undercutting them by so many thousands of dollars that it can't possibly be a judicious decision. I don't know that we have to undercut them by 5,000 in order to get that student. And then we also ought to be asking why they can get those students. And we all know why, is because their academic performance and their college acceptance rates and where their graduates go to college exceeds Wall Township. But that's a question for another day. I'd just be glad if we going to make money, because otherwise, as a parent, I begrudge the out-of-district student coming because I am paying the full freight. And if that student's not paying the full freight, I don't want that student to take any time away from my student in the teaching. It's ridiculous. It really does need to be looked at. It's been in effect for years, and I want to thank you for bringing it up. And this evening, Dr. Cram, how are you? I just wanted to make sure, this is sort of a question. I know you are in charge of the investigation, or at least you stated you were in charge of an investigation as to the trailers. So I, like Betsy, was a little surprised to hear you say you were rushing the Department of Education on this. I wanted to ask if you were aware that once those trailers are removed under the district's policy for document retention, you may in fact cause documents pertinent to your investigation to be destroyed at that time, consistent with the removal of the trailer. So I'm not so sure if you understood both your role and how you were undercutting your role by picking up the phone call to rush them along. The second thing is, when I was listening to Brian report on the Oprah responses again, my concern is that we have the fox guarding the chicken house. Somebody else has got to be looking for the documents. The issue that we have and that we keep sending in Oprahs on is the handling of one issue basically at this point. It's the trailers, the mishandling of the trailers, both their purchase and the handling of it once that toxins were discovered. And you're sending Brian Smythe to the basement, whether it's proverbial or not, whether it's his office or actually a basement, is irrelevant to me. But you have him looking for the own documents that will inculpate him. It really ought to be delegated to someone else. I would suggest yourself or somebody else go in and look for the responsive documents. We're not getting them. And the fact that he left out 17 pages of responsive documents that the Department of Education provided is a huge red flag in terms of Oprah. Now, the next questions I have are for Brian Smythe. First, as to the budget, last month you stated that the trailer leases were listed along with water and sewer expenses because someone told you to do that and that you didn't do it at random. You must have been directed to do that. My first question is, I want to know who directed you to mischaracterize those payments and put them with water and sewer instead of in the proper category of leases and purchase agreements. Second question, and why would you follow that direction when there is a specific budget category for district leases and purchase agreements, and you had in fact put other lease purchases in the proper category in other years? I went back, I looked, you've properly characterized them before. It's just this big one, this 1.4 million one where money's flying all over the place that we can't trace. And part of it is you're putting it in with water and sewer instead of a category you were very aware of, which is purchase and lease agreements. On the budget. So next was also a question for Brian on an email. November 5th, 2019, there was an email that you sent to someone who I don't know who it is, but it looks like it's a Wall municipal or a district employee. And you specifically asked him to conceal things at the trailers. And you just produced this under Oprah. First question, what did you direct the recipient to conceal? Who is that recipient? He uses a code name, like a name, like, you know, some boy club thing. I don't know who that is. Two, if your answer to me is that it was a direction to conceal just an open part of the building, I want to point out again that the date of the email was November 5th, 2019. The trailer should have been closed up as of August. So what were you telling him to conceal as of November 5th, 2019? It coincided with the date the dumpsters were placed on site. So I really want to have that identified and who you directed to do it.
Ms. Duran, your time is up.
Oh, can I get my third question out? It's kind of short.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. It concerns capping under the trailers. I just want to know if Brian directed anybody in the district or in the municipal area to cap off any of the utilities at the trailers or under the trailers so far. I want to know if that's been done. And I have questions about that. I'll ask it at the next meeting, but I just want a yes or no. Did he get that work done in advance of the, approval of the removal? And basically why he had someone do it instead of the approved subcontractor per the architectural plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bassett. Can you hear me?
Yep, good evening.
Okay, good evening. If the elementary and rising sixth grade summer remediation programs are in fact going to be virtual, I'm just wondering if they can't be inclusive of more students, because really every student in elementary school is missing out, not just 30%. I'm doing the best I can as a parent, but I'm obviously not a teacher, which is the situation I think that many district families find themselves in. And while the 30% or whatever it ends up actually being should of course get the type of small group live classes that they need and deserve, I would have my kids participate in virtual ELA and math review in August, even if they were previously recorded lessons by teachers that are available to everyone. One of the positive aspects of virtual instruction is that instruction can easily be made available to everyone. So I think that's something to consider. And I think at the elementary level, a lot of families would take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? Just raise your hand. Seeing none. I'm going to start with Dr. Gleason. In regards to what Samantha just asked, is that something that you've looked at or talked about doing?
This goes back to what Mrs. Mangan was also suggesting, that we consider ways to structure the program so that there's access for multiple types of students. Students that teachers identify based upon the evidence they have, and then also secondarily, access for students that parents are saying, that they feel their child is impacted by school closure. And I agree with Mrs. Bassett that parents are their children's teacher right now, and they have, in some cases, almost more evidence. So it is something that, as a board, I definitely think you'll have to consider, and we'll take a look at the funds that we've put in place. Again, 30% was a preliminary projection before we really have an opportunity to give teachers enough time to assess. And then we'll have to come back to this again at the end of May, beginning of June, and really see where our numbers lie. And then also survey parents to see the numbers where parents feel that their students are going to need those remediation. And perhaps it's going to look different. We'll have to really delve a little bit deeper, whether it's small group instruction for the students who are identified, and then some kind of hybrid with recorded lessons, and also some live instruction for parent recommended students. So it still will be a work in progress for sure.
And if for some reason, let's just throw a number out, 60% needs it, that's something that we as a district would be able to provide, or even a higher number. We'd be able to make plans and do the things necessary to accomplish that goal.
So what that would require would be, once we've identified a number that is in need, would require teachers willing to work and of course be paid during the summer. So assuming that we have enough teachers that would apply for that posting, we would post for those positions. And assuming that we have enough teachers to cover the programs that we're offering, then yes, the board could certainly, agree to approve those programs for the summer.
Okay, thank you. Andy, you had a question?
Am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure. It's been a couple meetings now where we've heard some concerns and comments regarding virtual instruction. And because of some of the contacts that I have and just
Andy, you're freezing up.
The interest that I have as a parent and a board member, I put out
Adam or Andy, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
And with his circle and in terms of what?
We can't hear you. You keep freezing up.
Okay, it must be my connection. Can you hear me now?
We can actually.
If you can't hear me, I'll save my comments for next time. But just basically that with just some districts such as Livingston, New Providence, Metuchen, Freehold, there's many different ways that school districts are approaching this, and a lot of it has to do with what they're able to provide, but it also has a lot to do with what their philosophy and their thoughts are as related to the COVID challenges. I know one person I spoke to told when he was teaching an advanced placement course, very high performing student, where they're not taking attendance for the class, his student.
You're frozen, Andy. Andy, you're frozen.
A student that he was thinking of at the time, mother is home with two younger siblings that are in elementary school, whether it's K8, I don't remember, or K5. And this child is having to keep her siblings on task with learning as well as trying to do her studies. So this is some of the reality that our students could be facing as well. And, I have two students that are in the schools and they're different children. Both they're different and the way they handle things is different. I think, it's obvious to me that we want to make this a good experience for our students, and I appreciate the updates that are being given. I'd like to ask that we continue with that and that we continue to reflect, because there is about 6 more weeks of school. What support the administrators are given and supervisors are giving to the method in which we are putting forth our virtual instruction. I know some of the concern that was mentioned even by a student that was online a couple of weeks ago was that their student not attending. And this is primarily high school that I'm talking about now. We have in place a live and then a taped class. And I don't know, how do you get students to toe the line? Another story I will share.
Andy, you're totally frozen. I think Andy's might be done. Aaron, you had
I don't want to see you in your bed half trapped while I'm trying to teach, since it's on a virtual screen.
Andy, I'm sorry. Andy, you've been freezing up.
That's okay. I think I made my point.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, you had a question?
Okay. So I'm just going off of basically what Ms. Bassett said. I'm thinking along the lines somewhere we have like 10 weeks of summer, okay? And we could possibly, focus on one ELA standard, one math standard a week, generate some online videos now that kind of wouldn't cost like we're looking for these teacher experts, who have these great lessons and maybe want to turnkey it, to a district-wide, platform where then we create like this bank of lessons for like these 10 weeks, that parents could use as supplemental, like nothing, where it has to be like you're logging on at this time, you have to complete the lesson at this time, but just to give the parents the extra support and comfort knowing that, your kid is going to get the best education continuous moving through the summer. And then even, a lot of the online platforms are giving like a lot of free access that a lot of teachers are taking advantage of at this point. Would we have the possibility of continuing these online programs that we have subscriptions for, during the year and that we've extended at this point as well, to keep the students to have that modality to use throughout the summer, such as like extra math or programs like that, parents wouldn't have to sit over the student, but would still receive, a report back at the end of the week stating what they've accomplished. So I think if we kind of formulate this now, it would be cost efficient, it would be beneficial because, we would have the online video database for parents to access with skills geared per their child's grade level. And if we continue the subscriptions moving forward that are, free at this point, it's not going to cost us as well. So I think if we kind of just pull our whole database at this point, parents will feel a lot better.
Anybody else have any, Dr. Gleason?
I just want to comment on that I think that's a solution that we could consider for some asynchronous learning, that any parent can go online and avail themselves of possibly 8 to 10 weeks of some lessons, as Mrs. Mangan said, whether it's one ELA, pretty thick ELA lesson, and a math and or a science or social studies each week. It could just keep kids engaged in learning. And so we certainly have teacher leaders. We're certainly saving some money in professional development right now, that we were not sending teachers out like we were in regular school time, that we could pay for those teachers. We do have provisions in the CBA where teachers get paid for creating those kinds of videos. So this would be outside of their regular expectations within the contract. So it is something that I will bring back to the supervisors at our May 14th meeting. And I think that's a good suggestion that makes that universally accessible to all parents, especially at the elementary grade levels.
Thank you. Dr. Cram?
Well, I was going to say, it's a great idea for us to be able to offer resources to the parents over the summer. And while I wouldn't want to discourage the wall teachers from developing those lessons, there's a tremendous amount of open educational resources that are out there. I know some of them we've already cataloged and recommended in some of the notices that Dr. Gleason has been sending out. But if we could catalog something for each grade level, just whether it's Khan Academy or something similar to Khan Academy, or online programs that might be aligned with the curriculums or textbooks that we're using, if we put that together as kind of a reference guide for parents, then any parent, would have the opportunity, if they wanted to, take advantage of those things and then either sit with their children and assist them in that, or make part of their scheduled day that they would take one or more of these lessons in language arts and or mathematics. I think we probably should make an effort to make sure that the parents, if they can't send their students, or if their students wouldn't be eligible for the programs we're talking about, that at least they'd have some resources that they could use at home, which I think would be a more efficient way for us to meet that need.
Thank you, Dr. Cram. Russell, you had a question, comment?
Yes, in reference to the delivery of the education and the variety of experiences, 100 people in a room, you're going to hear a variety of experiences, some good, some challenging, some not so good, and so on. And I think it's important to hear all the variety of experiences. I think it's important to recognize that as a district, we jumped into this in a very short period of time, not knowing the time frame. And I think we've done a very admirable job. And I think what's most important is to continue to listen to people's feedback on all counts, because we all know people in a variety of school districts, And I can tell you stories of people that I know who've been in synchronous, asynchronous, taking attendance, have to ask to go to the bathroom out of a virtual class type of situations. And you hear horror stories about all of them because it's just the nature of the circumstances. And so what's most important that I think we are doing is continuing to listen, continuing to evaluate, and making sure that if we do it in September, October, and November, or however long it might be, we're better then than we are now. And I think that's the plan and path that we're on. And I think that's the most important piece of all this.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Smythe, did you want to address any of these? There were a lot of questions thrown around. Conflicting numbers, 17 pages, 19 pages. I mean, it was all over the place. Is there anything you want to clarify?
With regard to Oprah's, I provided the documents that I submitted in accordance with the request to Dr. Les Richens. That's what was provided. With regard to the context which the word conceal was used, I can assure you that I've never asked anyone to conceal anything with regard to the trailers. I'm not sure what the request is referencing. If somebody else utilized that word and that was included in a document that we provided in response to Oprah, I can just, without question, say that I've not directed anyone to conceal anything. With regard to the continued request, inquiring whether we've disconnected utilities with regard to the trailers at Central Elementary School, the answer is no, we have not. The only thing that has been done is the water has been shut off, throughout the winter, but that was just the shutting off of a valve.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Cram, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, just to clear the record, I am not an investigator. I'm not a prosecutor. The board's intention was never for me to conduct a criminal type investigation. The question that was posed to me was what happened and what, if there were missteps, what can we do to change our operating procedures so that we don't make the same mistake again, and to solve the issue as quickly as we can, because the trailers need to be removed sooner rather than later. As far as what I know and who I'm talking to, I've told Ms. Cross at least, well, probably more than once, that my charge right now is to conduct a review of what happened and how best to resolve it, that will result in a report that will be given to the board, and the board will have to make the determine as to what in that report and when and to whom that report will be disseminated. So I'm not going to answer the daily questions that come in, like, what was this truck doing here? And did you see this picture? And I've got 1,000 pages, and that's not what I'm charged to do. The charge is to review the document, to review the process, and to recommend to the board if there were missteps, how those missteps can be avoided in the future, and to resolve the situation as quickly as possible, because the existence of the trailers is just an albatross around the board's neck right now, and it serves no purpose other than to give a handful of people the opportunity to try to embarrass the board or embarrass individual board members. And I think we need to resolve that as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. As for who's on the call, at the beginning of the meeting, there's a roll call, and then there's another roll call when we come back into when we go into executive session, and then there is a roll call when we come back out into public session. So there are 3 roll calls an evening, and you can see everybody's name on the screen and some pictures, and those are the people who are part of this meeting. And as for the policy, tonight was a first reading of policies, which will be at our board meeting, first reading. And then in June will be the second reading and the vote on all the policies that were presented tonight, unless there's significant changes and they're brought back to policy.
I can say, Mr. President, that those policies were recommended by Esme and Strauss. That's not something we're taking on our own. They are mandated policies. Every month we receive, I think we received in this particular package more than a dozen of them. I chose to go with the ones that were mandated. There are several that are simpler revisions and are optional policies for the board to consider, and we'll put them on the agenda as we have the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Cram. That is all I have. Does any board members have anything? Comments? Seeing none, could we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Andy is raising his hand for a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and everyone be safe.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.